والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about giving for the sake of our souls. These are reflections on charity. And so I like to remind us, myself first, and everyone that's here, that our presence in this time, not just in this community, although this community has a very unique story, but our presence, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Our presence in this time, in this country, as Muslims, is not a mistake. It's not something that just happened. The understanding that we have as a community negotiated our existence is a fallacy, because the fact is that our presence as a community of believers in the United States, specifically African American or black people, but not only African American or black people, is a miracle from Allah. It is the decree of Allah. And it's important to remember this and to know this and to teach this to our children, because there is the notion that, being in America and being an American Muslim is somehow a form of deficient Islam. That you can't really be a Muslim in America, right? And so, for example, when I was growing up, there was this idea that, you really can't be Muslim in America, right? So people hesitated to refer to themselves as Americans. I'm not really an American. I'm in America, but I'm not an American, right? And similar things, right? But what often gets past us when we neglect to really look at who we are, when we fail to understand the essence of our identity in this country, is that we end up overlooking certain important things. So this is why I like to open with this statement, that all of us are here by the grace and permission of Allah, first and foremost, and then by the prayers and the sacrifice of those who came before us. This is very important for American Muslims in particular, to remember the sacrifices and the prayers of those who came before them, those who came before us, because this represents how Islam has historically been transmitted. So the Prophet ﷺ, and I'll share this with you very briefly, one of the things that people don't know, like how certain Muslim countries became Muslim countries. So I'll share with you the example of the country of Morocco, right? So before the presence of Muslims in Morocco, Morocco was not a Muslim country. And one of the popular stories is the story of Moulay Idris. Moulay Idris was the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ. And if you know anything about the history after the Prophet's death, there was a lot of conflict in the community, and one of the things that happened historically is that the Prophet's family was systematically hunted down and exterminated. The most prominent story being the story of who? Hussein. This is an indisputable historical fact. The Prophet's grandson Hussein was exterminated, as was his grandson Al-Hassan. So this led to this phenomena of the Prophet's family, the remaining members fleeing. So Mullah Idris is a descendant of Al-Hassan. And the story says, the story says that Mullah Idris fled from Mecca, and his journey was a nomadic journey. And everywhere he went, he talked about his great-grandfather. And he called people to the way of his great-grandfather. And so it is a commonly believed story that Morocco is Muslim because of the blessing of Mullah Idris. That he literally, so like today the comparison would be in our cultural context, Imam Ratadi Muhammad, one of the things that he's credited with is the conversion of many former members of the Nation of Islam, some say thousands or 1,000, to Sunni Islam. Well, Mullah Idris back in that day literally converted people to Islam. So much so that there is a shrine that's been built to his memory. And in 1990 something, I was blessed to visit this shrine, right? And to recite Quran in this shrine of Mullah Idris, right? And he is credited with giving that to so many people that Morocco today is a Muslim country. So this phenomena of Islam being passed on through generations is very important. So you have the conversion process, which is one way that Islam continues, but you also have the continuation of Islam through generations. So I like to highlight the fact that we have two ongoing things today. We have many people converting to Islam today, and this remains true, right? 2018. But we also have intergenerational Islam, because you have the generation that comes before us, which are known as what? What do we call people who came before us? It's an Arabic word that is Salaf. Right? So you hear this word Salaf. And the Salaf are the people who came before you. That's all that means. The Salaf are the people who came before you. Right? It is true that in our cultural context, we have Salaf. And our Salaf are the men and women who came before us in time, who at one time were sitting where we're sitting, not literally, but they were sitting where we're sitting, learning the religion, studying the religion, paying for the religion, doing for the religion, the same way you and I strive to do. And one of the things that we must be mindful of is that we can never forget this fact, that we have Salaf, because it is a fallacy to believe that our Islam is the result of anything other than that, because it won't be true to who we are and how Allah gave us Islam. To believe that someone else deserves it, and likewise someone else is supposed to do the work, because it is also true that our Salaf did the work that needed to be done in order for Islam to reach us. And we must never forget this. And the work that they did came at a tremendous sacrifice. And yes, we are called to sacrifice as well. But if we were to do a look back in history, we would realize that our circumstances are incredibly different, better, right? And a part of why they're better is because of the sacrifice that our predecessors made, right? And so because of this fact, we must strive to honor their spiritual legacy. One of the things that when you talk to some of the older Muslims and you listen to them, you will realize that these were people who were sincere believers. So oftentimes when I have this discussion with people, we talk about something that seems to be missing, right, from people, and this is this quality of sincerity. Ikhlas, right? Sincerity. And they had this sincerity. It came out of the way they talked, out of the things that they did, right? Because they accepted the faith, they chose it, and then they sincerely strove to live it to the best of their ability. And we understand this from the stories. There are numerous stories of the things that they did in order to preserve who they were, in order to have a mosque, in order to have things in the mosque, they did these things, right? And this is their spiritual legacy. And so I always call myself first, and then I ask everyone to remember what, I call our founding fathers and mothers, to remember them in dua, right? To remember them in dua. It's important. And this is not worshiping the elders or worshiping the ancestors. This is giving them their due right. This is giving them the thing that will benefit them the most, which is our prayer. That Allah accept from them their good and forgive them for their mistakes, because they're like us and we're like them. And one day we will want someone to pray for us and ask Allah to accept our good and to forgive our mistakes. So today we're going to talk about giving, but I wanted to take a moment and ask everyone to reflect on that. Generosity is a state of the soul first. Generosity is a state of the soul first. And then I'd like to get some feedback from people as to what you think that means. What does it mean that generosity is a state of the soul? Right.
So we're talking about Kareem, being Kareem. Mm-hmm. All right, so he was generous. And a person who once a week or once a month who might give something to someone less fortunate or give something to a cause.
Raise your voice just a bit.
Or give something to a cause can't necessarily be considered Kareem, because that's something that's not an ongoing thing, but when it's a state of your heart and it's a state of your soul, it's something that happens without, you don't even have to think about it. The word goes out, the call goes out, you walk past a lady sitting on the street who's hungry and you feed her, or someone who is out of gas and you give them gas money or whatever it is. But that level is the level that's a state of the heart and the soul, as opposed to someone who, because they put on the spot, like we take a collection today right here and now. And so people feeling like, well, that's
it's pressure.
Yeah, it's pressure.
Everybody else is doing this.
Yeah, let me throw a couple dollars right now. That's not true Kareem or true generosity, because real generosity, when it is anchored in your heart, anchored in your soul, is something that you love to do for pleasure of pleasing Allah.
Anybody else? Yes,
when I heard a statement, it makes me think that generosity is a state of your soul, meaning how you look at what the generosity is doing. Like that it's more for you than it is for the other person. So a person who is reflective and who really understands the benefit of generosity knows that they're getting much more than they could ever be giving to the person.
That's very good. You had your hand up, so. You're my producer, so you're producing and commenting, and that's good. Go ahead.
I feel like it could go two ways. Like, it doesn't even have to be generosity towards another person. It could be generosity towards yourself, like
Okay.
towards your own soul. Like if you're putting your soul first as your priority, and like.
Don't say you know what I mean, because I don't know. I don't know what you mean. Go ahead.
Like,
You're good. Go ahead.
I was kind of gonna say the same thing, but like putting your soul first, doing things for you, like not even only doing things for you, but doing things that will benefit you, without thinking like, oh, okay, this will benefit me personally, but this will benefit my soul.
Okay, that's good. Anybody else? Yes.
I also feel that sometimes people think that generosity can be a sort of a get out of jail free card.
It could do what? Say that again?
Get out of jail free card. So like if you're in a state where you feel as if you've done all these wrongs and you're trying to wipe the slate clean in order to access general. So sometimes I think people are generous not for the sake of generosity, but for the rewards that they think they will get for it. So they're putting the cart before the horse, and that's because of the state of their soul.
Okay. Is there anything wrong with that?
I think if the intention is that I'm doing this for the outcome. Like so for example, I've always heard this story of like when there's blood in the streets, there's money to be made.
Blood in the streets is money to be made. Keep that.
So
Right.
like the time when you had war in Nazi Germany, there's lodging about million. When time when they needed to now wipe their slate clean, to be clean and to be morally upstanding, they presented themselves as generous, as giving back, because they knew they'd done all this.
Right.
And so for me, the intent there would be important. If you're doing this purely for the sake of Allah, but if you're doing this because you know you're in a state of corruption and you're trying to present a different self, then so that's why I feel like the state of the soul comes in, because it could be doing it for something that's purely good, but it could be doing it for something that's nefarious as well.
Excellent. And that also goes back to the discussion about intention. Right. So the intention is important. Yes.
I think also being generous puts you in a different state of mind, and so instead of operating at a deficit, you're giving something, and so it also helps you be grateful that you even have that, whatever it is, to give.
Right. You had your hand up, Uncle?
Yes, I was going to say what they said.
Where's your voice?
I was going to say the same thing. What they said. I think generosity just reflects off your character as a person, and just doing it for the sake of Allah, to be generous to someone or to that something, or et cetera, et cetera. That's all I was going to say.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So there's no wrong answers. Right? Everybody's contribution is a part of what we're seeking here, okay? Because this state of the soul, right, is something that, we'll come back to. Because this is the heart of what giving is. And I think it's important for us to consider what Allah calls us to do, and then also to consider how we are acculturated to do things. Right? Because oftentimes, yes, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to move on. I feel as though sometimes with generosity, a lot of people who are giving just because it's just in their nature. They just do.
Right.
You get kind of on that line where it's like, look, I'm always doing. I'm tired. I'm always doing. I'm sick. I'm always doing. And know that you're doing it, for somebody else, but also for yourself. You get kind of in a state where where you feel like, oh man, if I don't do it this time, then I'm not going to get the reward for it, or I'm not going to get the benefits for it. And I feel like you get to a point where you feel like maybe some people might be taking advantage of your
Right.
overextended generosity, but then you don't want to miss out on your blessings and your rewards for it.
Right. Right. And this is why we have to always look at the intention while we're doing it, because the intention will inform whether or not we continue doing it. And even in a situation, each independent situation, our intention will inform the best course of action, right? But intention is certainly a very key part, right? And keep that in mind, because when we talk about, so a couple of people mentioned giving for the sake of Allah, right? Oftentimes, we may not invest enough thought into what that means, right? Because what it means, in theory, is if I give something for the sake of Allah, I'm always going to be all right. It's always the right thing to do. So as long as I investigate, my intention, and I'm doing it for that reason, then Allah is going to take care of me. It sort of goes back to, so last week, Imam Qais was talking in his talk about, what was the topic last week? Forgiveness. And he made a statement about how our, not our understanding of Allah, but our impression or our opinion. Having a good opinion about Allah. And how that informs what you do. Because once you come to accept that if I'm doing this, it empowers you to make a better decision about giving. Because if you choose not to give, you have the right to do that. But if you choose to give, even if you feel like this person is not appreciating it, they might take it for granted or whatever, you're giving for the sake of Allah, and so that's the right reason to give. Is that helping a little bit? That's the right reason to give. And oftentimes we don't think about that part of it enough, right? Because oftentimes we're finding ourselves in a situation, everybody's giving, so I'm going to give. I don't want to be the odd man or woman out or anything like that, which is normal, right? But when we make the intention a part of it, right? And the intention connects back to what something that Fatima said about reflecting. So when you reflect on your giving and why you're giving, you remove some of that stuff. You get that out the way, right? And we're going to get into that a little bit more in the talk. Yes, Brother Simon.
Whenever this subject comes up about giving from your heart and giving for reward and how people feel about that, I always think about, I feel like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this a part of our lives also for those people who are not used to giving and don't know how to give. Because if you get into it, you can learn how to give.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn what it does for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's also for people to become accustomed to doing it, to learn how to do it and see what it does for their own soul.
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the reasons why we have to put some thought into what it means to give for the sake of Allah is because I mentioned how we are acculturated. So we live in America. And in America we have the right to freedom of this, and what? The individual pursuit. The individual pursuit of happiness. And value is a great value. However, what that value can create is this sense of self-interest only. Individual interest only. And this can be problematic in the context of a, like, you don't have that frame that you were raised in, right? So we're looking at legitimate things. Like when we talk about giving in this cultural context, the first thing that we want to know is somebody's motives. Why are you doing this? Like, why are they giving me this? Right? So that you can contrast that with the experience of being in a society or a community where people will literally give you stuff and just walk away. And imagine your state of mind. As an American, right? Why are you doing this? Well, the why often is that they are believing that there's a reward for them to give. That's why they give it. And that's it. However, in our context, it often doesn't call us to law, God, and, it calls us to my self is good for me only. Because being concerned about your interests good for you is we have to learn because we have all to negotiate. We have to negotiate it, and we have to face it. We have to struggle with how we're reared. Now, some people, by their upbringing, are reared in a family that's generous, they give. Their mom was always cooking for somebody. Their grandma always got somebody over. Their dad always was always doing something for his kids and all the kids in the neighborhood. Some people are accustomed to that, but some of us aren't. And those of us that aren't, it doesn't mean that we're Christian per se. It just means that we have to learn the behaviors of the believer. Because when talks about the believer, he talks about certain behaviors. One of these behaviors is that the believers are generous. Was right? So we read these stories. Mind-blowing. The prophet would give so much. What I just said, he would give so much that everything at home. He got just enough for his family. And I advocate this. Okay? This is where it can go. That's how. Because the peace upon him never wanted. Every time he gave, it was replaced. So he, oftentimes, I just said, all they had was. So this notion of how do we cultivate this spirit, right, and this state of the soul? Well, my attempt to this is to first look at the month of Ramadan. Ramadan, we're called to do a few things. One is to what? Give charity, right? And then in the month of Ramadan, we have what? That's a form of giving, right? And then I'm tested on Friday. One of the imams is asking to give something. The idea of blessing our money is right? It's something that we find. And if you read Quran, this month, most of the verses that talk about also talk about what? Zakat. And they talk about salah and zakat together. So that connection is important. What zakat is spiritually. So first, the definition for zakat comes from the root zakat or zakat, which means to grow, which means to make plentiful, and which also means to purify. The three other meanings of the word zakat, to grow. So this word is used in modern language, modern Arabic. It's used in investment. So they refer to profits as zakiya, right? In agriculture, because when there's produce, right, and it grows, you hear the word zakat. In the law, it means, legally it means to go to make plentiful or to purify. The legal definition is that zakat is a legal mandated amount that be given from one's wealth annually. This is what if you open any book of fiqh, this is the rough definition, right? And so, the Prophet ﷺ has said that Islam is built upon 5 pillars: the shahada, the salat, and the zakat. So this is what the Prophet was referring to when he said that. This legally mandated amount. And what's legally mandated amount? What's the amount? Everybody knows it. 2.5. 2.5 of what? 2.5% of what? Your excess wealth. Right? So I think a little bit today about that understanding, not that it's wrong. Not that it's wrong, but this is what I find in the law. We also need to understand that zakat is the primary form of charity giving in Islam. So it's like the social welfare. It's the wealth that is collected, and it's collected by those in charge for the general welfare of everyone. It's free from poverty as much as possible. This is why Abu Bakr went to war. Why did he go to war? Because there could be no balanced society with a bunch of praying folk only. But everybody was hungry, right? Or people were hungry. So the ethical form of governance required that he had to make sure that there was money in the treasury. There are different types of zakat, because oftentimes we use the word zakat, and I want to make sure that you understand different types of zakat when you hear the word zakat. So for example, the primary form of zakat is called zakatul mal. That is the annual 2.5 of your excess income, or whatever the definition is. That's called zakatul mal. But then we have zakat al-fitr, which we will be paying in a couple of weeks, and that's paid at the completion of the month of Ramadan. The caveat here is that oftentimes people think that if they pay zakat al-fitr, they have paid the first. That's not the case, because the second one is connected to Ramadan. It's part of what you have. And what is the purpose of that zakat? Yes.
Is it to make sure those who can afford joyous Eid can have a joyous Eid?
So that zakat is connected to. So when you hear us make an announcement, for example, in the mosque, we talk about zakat al-fitr, and we've calculated it to a number. It's what, $9 or $10, right? Well, $10 is not 2.5% of anybody's income, right? $10 is for the day, or per individual in the head of household's home, right? So that distinction has to be made. Sometimes people assume that if I pay zakat al-fitr, I'm paying zakat. No, you're paying zakat al-fitr. But notice how this act of worship, which is the Eid, which is a prayer, has associated with it this effort to make the joyous occasion more equitable between people. Right? So if you can't afford anything, at least they can afford a nice meal, maybe some new clothes, right? And they are able to afford that with the assistance of. And then you have the word sadaqah. And often sadaqah in the literature is used as a synonym for zakat. So zakatul mal is also called sadaqatul mal. It's important that you understand the difference between these terminologies, because you want to be clear about what is the obligation upon you. And zakat is an obligation upon us. So out of the three, which one is an obligation? This is a pop quiz. Zakatul mal is wajib. What about zakat al-fitr? What would you say? Here we go with the Muslims. Strongly recommended. Wajib. She's white, right? You say wajib, she just strongly recommended. Right? So it's wajib. But according to the madhab, so strongly recommended really in this instance only means that some legal people didn't feel comfortable saying it was wajib because the evidence was not overwhelming. But really, it's in the Maliki school of law, it's wajib. So the person who needs to hear that heard that. So we're going to leave that alone. We're not going to repeat it. So the first two, zakatul mal and zakatul fitr, are both obligatory. They're both obligatory. That means that this is the giving, sort of like in the Christian tradition, there's tithing, there's giving in Islam. The mandated giving is represented by zakat. Both zakatul mal and zakatul fitr. And then sadaqah is the giving that is at your discretion. So when Brother Ibrahim talked about seeing somebody on the street, you can choose to give sadaqah to that person or not. Sister Jane, when you talked about sometimes feeling taken advantage of, right? Well, that will usually occur when you're giving sadaqah. So you can regulate your sadaqah giving because you don't want to burn yourself out. Right? You don't want people to take advantage of your kindness, right? However, understand that when you give freely, that form of giving is at your discretion. And it's called sadaqah. And it's different than the top two. Okay? Yes.
And when you were talking, it sounds like you're making a distinction between the top two.
Because there is. One is given connected to Ramadan. The other one is general. It's like the tax. We pay taxes once a year. That first one is like your taxes. Okay? The second one is connected to the worship of the month of Ramadan. Does that help?
It does.
Okay. Yes.
So with the purpose of Zakatul Fitr being to make the Eid like equitable, is there something similar for Eid al-Adha?
Eid al-Adha is the sacrifice.
Okay.
When we slaughter the animal.
And then it was-
Yeah, we don't just be killing animals.
I didn't make the connection.
Right, but that's the point. So that is still a form of giving. So connected to the Eid. Okay? Yes. Right, so we're going to get to that. That's a very good question. First, yes.
You said it's highly recommended. It kind of almost implies that it's optional. So if it's optional, then why is it the emphasis that you
Right,
pay
because
for the prayer?
in Islamic legal terms, when something is highly recommended, that means that you should do it at the risk of being committing a sin if you don't. So that's legal terms. So it doesn't mean it doesn't mean how it sounds. It sounds like it's optional, but really it's not. That's legal definition, legal terminology. Okay? Because the actual wording is sunnah mu'akkada. Sunnah mu'akkada. So it's a sunnah that's highly encouraged. So that really means that if you want to be good, you should do it. You know, as opposed to not, especially if you don't have a reason. Now, the other reason why some people say that it's not obligatory is because of the fact that some people might feel compelled to try to do it and they can't. And the person that can't afford to pay Zakatul Fitr, it doesn't have to pay it. Okay? Does that help? So why pay zakat? We must pay our zakat, so what is our motivation? Right? So one point to consider is striving for spiritual excellence. Striving to be in compliance with what Allah wants from us. Striving to be in compliance with what Allah wants from us. Allah says, "Aqimu as-salah wa atu az-zakat." So, I want to be compliant. I want Allah to be pleased with me. I must strive to be in compliance with what Allah wants from me. And Allah doesn't just want me to pray. Right? Allah wants me to pray and to give. And I should strive for that. Right? The other thing is that giving zakat cultivates in us sensitivity to the needs of other people, others. It trains us not to walk by misery and have no effect on us, which is the danger of having too much. We're blinded by excess, right? Or when we are blinded by greed and we're only focused on how much I want. That can blind us to what others need. I repeat, when we're motivated by only how much I want, it could potentially blind me to what others need. So the habit of giving zakat actually sensitizes me to pay attention to the needs of other people. Because sometimes people have needs that aren't needs for me. And I take that need, I take my having it for granted. Right? So I may take for granted my ability to walk into a store and buy what I want, as opposed to store and I have to negotiate $5, for example. Right? Those are two different realities. Yes.
Is that ever be considered acts or time or service, or is it only physical? Like, is it only money? Like,
So not the zakat. The zakat, the sadaqah, and I go back to the opening reflection. Generosity is the state of the soul. So that giving is not limited to money, right? But that's sadaqah, not zakat. Okay? And we might have time to get back to that. That's a good point. Also, when we give, we're doing our part to alleviate suffering. Now, none of us is expected to alleviate all human suffering. It's not reasonable expectation. But the opposite is not true either. That we're supposed to just be okay with human suffering. So people are hungry and I have no response. People need and I have no response because it's not my problem. Well, this is a horrible state. This is a horrible human state to be in, let alone a spiritual state. And for those of you that are here Friday, the point that I tried to make, that people don't think about, the Prophet Muhammad was known to be generous, and he didn't discriminate between themselves. Anybody that came to him, he gave them. He didn't say, well, I'm going to give you if you're a Muslim, not going to give you if you're not a Muslim. He didn't do that. Right? So this, it should tell something about this. This state of generosity and the state of giving, what it actually means, right? Because he didn't discriminate in his giving. So that's another motivation for us. And last, seeking a station of higher spiritual excellence, which is what we should all pursue. If we feel that we're in one place, we shouldn't be complacent. You know, we should want to be better spiritually, right? And so because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who give. So I'm going to give you a very short story. So there, listen, and I played it last week. I'm going to repeat it, where the Prophet's wife Aisha was accused of, inappropriate behavior with. He said the handsome Bedouin. That was pretty good. The handsome Bedouin, right? And the story is in the Sirah. Aisha got separated from the caravan, and the man was the person who followed the back of the caravan to pick up lost people, lost things, right? And Aisha was lost, and he brought her back to Medina. People saw her and him coming into the city. People started talking. Only this time they talked about the Prophet's wife. So, of course, everybody was upset. The Prophet was upset, Aisha was upset, and Aisha's dad, Abu Bakr, was upset. And it just so happens that one of the people who were talking badly about Aisha was someone who Abu Bakr gave buku sadaqah to. Because Abu Bakr was, by day, one of the people that he took care of. So when they started participating in this scandal about his daughter, what did Abu Bakr do? He did what any person would do. Bad. You're talking about my family? You go ahead and take care of yourself. What did Allah say, revealed to the Prophet to tell Abu Bakr? He didn't mention Abu Bakr's name, but he said, those who are giving, let them not stop giving. Abu Bakr recited this verse, the story says, he recited it to Abu Bakr. He didn't have to say, Abu Bakr, you should do this. Abu Bakr knew that Allah was talking about him. And that's sort of what I was saying earlier to Sister Jane and everybody else. Like, when we know why we're giving, then takes us to another space with it. When I know why I'm doing it. So Allah spoke to why Abu Bakr was giving. He wasn't giving for that person. He was giving for his soul. So why would he hurt his soul? Because of what this person did. Not that what the person did was right, was wrong, but that Abu Bakr, Allah was calling him to this higher station of spiritual excellence. And that is work and effort. It's not easy. It's easy to say or to claim it. It's harder to achieve it. Because the moment you declare, that's what I want to do, what happens? Automatically, one of your challenges is like, Shaitan will suggest, now why are you doing all that? Everybody else is not doing that. You're better than everybody else right now where you are. But is that better in the eyes of Allah? Right? So this is why it's important for us to think about our motivations. And we do that, ultimately, going back to what we said earlier, when we reflect. When we reflect. In the Quran, Allah says, take from their wealth a charity of edification, and make them grow, and pray for them, for very great is the to them, and Allah is all hearing, all knowing. This verse is in Surah Tawbah, verse 3, and this is where we get the understanding that paying the first type of zakat is an obligation. Because Allah commanded the Prophet to take from their, he called it a charity, we translate it as charity. In the Quran it says sadaqah, but in this case, this is an example of sadaqah meaning zakat. Right? And the purpose of it is what? That it's a purification. It's a purification of our wealth. I want to elaborate on that in a minute. And make them grow. Make them grow out. Make them grow spiritually. And pray for them. Because every time somebody would respond to the Prophet's call, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what happened? The Prophet would pray for them. And this is beneficial. And we know the stories. These are stories that have become a part of, the tradition. When the Prophet would call people out or ask for assistance. And the different responses from different people. Some of the women gave Prophet everything they had, not just the men, not just Abu Bakr. Some people just gave the Prophet needed. Some people measured their giving. And I believe that a part of this lesson is that it speaks to the humanity of the companions. Everybody wasn't the same. Everybody's iman was the same. Abu Bakr's iman was not like Umar's iman. Or I should say Umar's iman was not like Abu Bakr's iman. Because we have one story where the Prophet asked for help Umar to gain money. He said, half. Logical, makes sense, probably something that I would have done. Right? Then Abu Bakr said, I give you access to everything I have right now. Right? And then he bankrupted himself. He made it back. He was a businessman. But whatever he had that day, he gave it to the Prophet. So when the Prophet asked him, what did you leave for your family? What did he say? That on that long, so those are the levels of belief. It's okay. You're not prepared to do what it takes to be like Abu Bakr. And I'm not talking here. I'm talking about the level of faith and belief. Abu Bakr had unshakable faith. He had unshakable faith. Right? In another verse, Allah says, charity goes to the poor and the needy and those administration, and those whose hearts are to be won over, and for the freedom of human beings from bondage, and for those who are overburdened with debt, and for every struggle in God's cause, and for the wayfarer. This is an ordinance of God. So this is also sort of verse 65 outlines the different categories, groups that zakat or sadaqah can be to, and it's self-explanatory. The poor, the needy, those who are in charge of it, the responsible leaders in the community, those whose hearts are to be won over, and this yeah, I'm not going to get into this. And human beings, I did want to say something here. So, for example, today, we know that slavery is outlawed, right? According to international law, according to the law of the United States, you can no longer own slaves. Is that correct? Okay. Y'all believe that? I don't think y'all believe that. Now, I understand. But on the books, slavery is illegal. International law, slavery is illegal. And yet, still, we find that people all over the world are still being enslaved. So there's a slave crisis or a situation in Libya, right, in Africa. There's a slave trade in Europe. There's a trafficking of children, trafficking of women, right, in many parts of the Gulf, right? The slave business is still alive and well. It's just not done legally. Right? There are organizations that work to free people from this type of bondage. Today, if I choose to set up or even zakat, an organization like this, I'm following the verse. Because zakat is supposed to be used for bondage. And for those who are overburdened with debt, and for every struggle in lost cause. The Prophet ﷺ said, he who believes in God and his messenger, that he pays his zakat on his possessions. The implication of this hadith is clear that if we don't pay the zakat, then we don't believe in Allah and his messenger. So this is where we get the understanding that it is an obligation. Okay? The value of paying zakat. Zakat, when it's often mentioned in conjunction with prayer, is one of the ways of creating economic equity in the community. It also sharing wealth and means to provide a balance between excessive frugality and greed. Right? So there's such a thing as being frugal, right? And then being greedy. Now, in the American ethos, one of the challenges that we face is that we have to fight this. So capital feeds off of greed. So being cultivated in a capitalistic society, one of the spiritual diseases we have to be mindful of is our tendency towards greed and excessiveness and because we have too much. Our reality is that we don't have too much. We have too much. Not everybody, but most, we have too much. You go right up the shop, right, 52nd and Jefferson, and I love to use this example from me before. Okay, example. 52nd and Jefferson. I said, hey, you know, some of the young boys go buy me a loaf of bread. What do you think the first question they're going to ask me is?
What kind of bread do you
What kind of bread? Now, we contrast that. Why? Because you got wheat bread, white bread,
Right.
Okay.
pumpernickel,
Potato bread, like
potato bread,
Banana bread.
banana bread. Then you got the flavored bread. You got waffle bread. I saw on the store today. French toast bread. I mean, just, you can compile this with like types of bread. Now contrast that with when you're on Hajj, and no, I think it was Umrah. I was on Umrah, and I was with some brothers. We were walking down the street, and a truck came and pulled over, right? And we smelled the bread, right? And it was a delivery truck, and it was full of bread, and people just rushed to line up. And it was this one type of bread called salmuli. Salmuli is like a hoagie roll, and it was hot hoagie roll. The truck pulled up, everybody jumped in line, and it was poor people. Somebody sent a truck full of bread to distribute to the poor. The brothers had never seen anything like that in their lives. Some of them grew up in the projects. They had never seen people line up to get bread. And it was just that one type of bread. Because the reality is, if that's what you need and you're hungry, that bread is like gold. Alhamdulillah. So to have what we have access to, and in America, your money equals access, that means that we have a tremendous blessing. So we should be mindful of it. That's a blessing. It's not our right. It's not our right of Allah that He blessed us like that. Allah has blessed us. And that's just bread. We're not talking about eggs. How many variety of eggs are there? You got large, medium, extra large, y'all know y'all, brown eggs, free range, right? Right, cage free. There you go. See, imagine that, as opposed to just eggs. That's a blessing. Milk. I mean, we could go on and on. The point being that all of this is access, not need. And we have to understand the difference, right? So when we have this, and we have access to this, right, it can cultivate in us an insensitivity about what it means to not have. Right? So this is where we have to be careful. And this is why zakat is good for us, why giving is good. Then there's the spiritual benefit of giving zakat. It is said that in wealth and material possessions there is afflictions, temptations, and problems. The one who pays zakat will be safe from these. The Messenger of Allah said, when you graciously pay the zakat due on your possessions, you shall have diverted away from you the evil day. So this is the purification. This is part of the purification. That when I give to Allah what is to Allah, this is a form of protection from wealth. Right? And think about it for a time. It sounds familiar. It is said that about material possessions. This is like what Puff Daddy said, right? More money, more problems, right? That's the reality that the more you have, the more you attract certain things. And all of them aren't positive. Right? The more knowledge you have, the more wealth you have, the more beauty you have. So, very quickly, so call you to rethink how we can pay our zakat. I started thinking about this a lot because oftentimes, over the years, before I was a leader in the community, even as a member of the community, whenever we got around the topic of zakat, we talked about the topic of zakat, this deep, complicated thing. So you got the 2.5, then the wealth you have it for a year, then it's the different types of things, money, assets, the livestock, cows, all this stuff that's really legally burdensome. Especially for me, I just want to pay my zakat. Tell me how I can pay my zakat, right? Then you got to have Beitul Mal, and if you don't have Beitul Mal, we're in America, so we really don't have to pay zakat, which is a tremendous fallacy, and spiritually dangerous. So that's the first thing we have to understand. Just because we're in America doesn't mean that we don't have to pay zakat. Places are, most of the countries, it may not be true. Right? So we should reframe that assumption and understand that you pay zakat no matter where you are. Right? So traditionally in Muslim history, the payment of zakat has been connected to and enforced by the state. This is true. Since this is not a Muslim country, and additionally because the state does not have the right to establish a particular religion, which means that citizens are free to practice any religion of their choice, the obligation to pay the zakat in this cultural context literally means paying for the establishment and support of our Islamic institutions with our wealth, contributing to it. What this really means for us is that we want a mosque, we pay for a mosque. And I've come to this conclusion because, you know, I've worked, of course, in my community. I've also worked in the so-called immigrant community, and I've noticed that this mentality about zakat is consistent. So even in the immigrant communities where we assume everybody got money, right? That's a fallacy. Everybody doesn't have money, right? But part of what happens is the zakat that should be used to support the institution is sent overseas. And you'll notice it. Every Ramadan, every year, you see it. Send zakat to here. Send your zakat to Bangladesh. Send your zakat to Kenya. Well, what about the zakat for Kensington? That one time I was in QUBA, I was like, yeah, it's nice to send zakat to Kenya, but what about Kensington? Just to get people to think, why are we taking the zakat and sending it thousands of miles away? That means that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about the role that zakat can play in our own flourishing and development. And that the fact is, and this is the danger that we face, that many affluent communities make only a few people pay for everything. That's one model. And that's a model in a lot of these communities. But without the examination of the role that zakat plays in the maintenance and sustaining of our communities, we run the risk of not having communities. We won't have institutions. Because unlike the Christian community, and unlike the Jewish community, where this sense of the connection between giving and the institutions and giving and the places of worship has been maintained for whatever reason, in the Muslim community, this seems to be lost. So much so that you go to a church. If I want to go as a Muslim and sit in the church service, and the pastor starts talking, even I would feel inclined to go in my pocket. And I'm not a Christian. Because it's automatically assumed that you do it, right? Contrast that with in the mosque, sometimes people feel put upon. So the question is, what happened? How did the connection become severed? Right? So this is why the rethinking, because my argument is that everybody can pay zakat. I said this on Friday, and I'm going to say it again. So the first thing that we have to do is go back to the idea that if you are Muslim, you must have a home masjid. You must belong somewhere. You must belong somewhere. Belonging somewhere means that you belong there in your person and your money. And if you belong there in your person and your money, that means that you are accountable and responsible. And if you don't have a home mosque, you don't belong somewhere, that means you're not accountable and you're not responsible. And that's a huge problem. And you can't build mosques and maintain masjids, let alone an entire community of people who aren't accountable and who aren't responsible. And again, this is a problem that I observed in my limited observation that is consistent in both the African American community as well as the immigrant community, and it's for different reasons. Oftentimes for them, real Islam is at home. But we don't know that at home, the zakat, the government takes care of that. So for example, the government, they collect taxes and zakat, but it's structured. Right? So they collect, there's a way to pay your zakat to structure, and then they disperse it. Here in the United States, that structure would be our masjids. That structure would be our masjids. So, to summarize and to conclude, the idea of giving is a central idea in Islam. That is an obligation in Islam. Giving for the sake of Allah can be an obligation and is encouraged in Islam. Let's all negotiate what that means for us, each of us. Right? The easiest way for us to begin is by committing ourselves to financial commitment. The easiest way to make a financial commitment is lift it up. And I said something on Friday that I want to repeat today, because I want you to see how all of this is connected. So one of the things we talked about zakat being a way and sadaqah of alleviating need and suffering, right? So I told people on Friday that for the past 5-6 years, this message has experienced like every week somebody comes by. They either call or they come by for assistance. Right? And alhamdulillah, different people. Over time, some of these people are known. Like, so I think I told you guys a story. I told the class one time about the young man who was walking up and down like Avenue, and he just got a job. He didn't have no money to get to the job. So he came and he saw Imam Anas on the sidewalk. Imam Anas gave him car fare. And he swore that he was going to come back. He didn't come back. Right? And, but then he didn't come back right away. But eventually he came back again, and Imam Anas gave him more so. And then one time he came and gave Imam Anas some money. He said, this is the money that you gave me. Right? This is the money that you gave me. I'm sorry I didn't give it back when I said I was. Right? Because the reality is, not all the people that are doing bad, not all of the people that are doing bad are bad. The frightening thing is that what's happening in this country, a lot of discussion about people are poor, and they're poor because they're wrong. They're not poor because they're poor because there's something wrong with them. So they're blaming them and shaming them. Right? We can't adopt this mentality, right? So we have to be careful about these kind of judgments. But to have someone come and say that I came to this masjid because I was told that you will help people. For me, that's a refreshing thing. That's a refreshing thing. You're going to make the discretion, you use discretion when you are dealing with individuals. But as a general principle, you want people to feel that they can come to the mosque and get some help. The same way they feel they can go to the church and get some help. Because that's how I feel about it. That's how I feel about it. People feel that they can go to the church and get some help. And somebody's going to figure out a way to help. Give them a meal, give them some money to get a meal. Or they might try to proselytize, they might try to preach the word to them. But that's, that idea that I can come to the mosque and get some help. That shouldn't be a foreign thing. People should feel. Otherwise, what good is the mosque? Right? So, that's something that you need to know as well. That when we give, maybe the $10 that I give, if Imam Anas gives it to somebody else and it helps somebody else, I'm assisting in helping somebody else. Because my $10 that went to help. Person. And this is the beauty of giving and this idea that we can take care of ourselves and take care of each other. It's rooted in that. It's rooted in that. That we take care of, we can do what we can to take care of each other.
I always try to speak to.
You got to speak up a little bit since you're in the back.
I always try to speak to cultivate behaviors in children and families because I grew up as a God-fearing Christian. My family grew up with the notion that God had a right of our money. That was something I was real like. I went to church, my mother gave me a quarter for God and a quarter for me. And she would tell me, if you steal God's quarter, you know what's going to happen to you.
That's right.
You
thought you had 50 cents.
I gave you a quarter. You take God's quarter if you want to.
But you got 50 cents,
what's
right?
going to happen to you. God's going to do to you.
Right.
But the whole thing is, when you cultivate very, very young, that the religious organization has a right to their wealth, and has a right to their service, and has a right over them. So then as they go through life, they feel a commitment to that religious entity, that organization. And model those behaviors with our children, and they have to see us giving, and not just giving, and not just giving, when we're at a banquet and doing something, et cetera, but the continuous notion of how do we create children that are giving beings, that have a sincere love or love for God's creation, and feel compelled they are connected to the well-being of someone else.
That's right.
And this is something that we really have to consciously do. It's not going to happen if we don't consciously cultivate this notion of giving and rights that others have on us, and rights that organizations have on us, because all of this comes from the Holy Land, and we need to activate that. We need to consciously tell our children to be givers. Because the Christians, listen, I grew up, you are taught. My entire life I was taught that other people have rights over me, other people have rights to everything I have. I don't care if it's your last something. If someone else needs it, it is not yours, it belongs to them.
Yeah.
And so when you grow up cultivating that notion, is that right? Because Reese and I had this conversation for like 2 hours after lunch about the notion of giving, and how different perception of giving. And and I must say,